Thank you very much, Craig. I lost count. I'm sure there are more than 18 questions in that, and all question marks. Right, all the better for it. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to the last of the four speakers this morning, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the stand a colleague from Tate, Marc Sands, who is now Director of Audience and Media at Tate. I think of you as a new colleague. I mean, you've been here a little while, but Tate is one of those places where you have to be here for more than a decade before you kind of become part of the old guard. He was formerly at the Guardian and the Observer, and as you can see from his biography, deeply involved in current media. So, over to you, Marc.
Great. Firstly, Philip, I spent 10 years at the Guardian and now at the Tate, and having eviscerated the Guardian earlier and had a good go at the Tate, I'm looking forward to the debate. I'm approaching this in a very different perspective. My responsibility here is to position the Tate, and in particular Tate Britain, in the minds of an audience outside. So much as I have actually loved the presentations earlier, my job, I have to land these presentations and land an idea in people's minds in the outside world. And how British should Tate Britain be has been a question that I suppose has slightly dogged this place for some time. And it's dogged it partly because on the one hand you've got Tate Modern, and on the other hand you've got Tate Britain. And if you can imagine, you're all very engaged in this subject, but there are audiences who are not. And for them outside, they are thinking, okay, there's the big one's called Tate Modern, that's got all the new stuff in it. And there's this other one called Tate Britain, and that's basically got all the old stuff in it. And that is what people think outside of this room. That is what people think. You ask it, not anyone, but a non-closely art-engaged audience, that's what they're thinking. And on the Tate Modern stuff, they've largely got it right. But on the Tate Britain stuff, they've got it completely wrong. Partly because it's not just the old stuff, point one. And point two, actually, what it really is, as you know, is a repository, if you like, of British art that has been made over the last 500 years or so. But people don't understand it that way. And I have been asked and have taken on the challenge of trying to get that thought into people's minds. And in doing so, you stumble into this area very quickly of how much should we play off on the British thing, because there's two issues that need to be resolved. One, it's the modern and the historic in this gallery, and secondly, it is artists who either are British or have worked and lived in Britain. So how British should Tate be? It's a difficult question. Now, we have done a lot of work here at Tate in the last 18 months, and this is a note from Penelope Curtis, who's the director of Tate Britain, and I've sat and mused with her for hours on this subject, and we have landed in a particular place that I'll show you in a moment, but I'd be interested, this is her view of what Tate Britain is or could be or should be. Tate Britain represents something unique. Not only does it show art from a long period, the last 500 years, but shows it through the lens of a particular place, the place where we live. This is Britain, which is the campaign I'm going to talk to you about, is about the past speaking to the present in a particular place. It's about the way in which our visual culture has been shaped by what has gone before. And it's also about how what has gone before is interpreted or reinterpreted now. It is about a living tradition. The campaign, and that's what I've been charged with developing, should help us to focus the attention on who we are, a gallery dedicated to showing art from the past and the present, and how that art is shaped by where it's made and where it's interpreted. Now, clearly, if you unpack that statement, you end up in the territory that the previous speakers have been talking about. And if I'm brutally honest, I've slightly avoided that, because I think I have to land it, I have to make a decision, and the joy of the earlier speakers is they don't really have to come to a conclusion that ends up as an advertising poster. Now, I do, which makes it incredibly difficult. And as I said, the reality of Tate Britain is different to the perception held by many. Tate Britain is actually the home of National Collection, the place to view British art from 1500 to the present day. But for many, however, it is perceived to be just where the old stuff is. And it's hardly surprising, given the naming convention, as I mentioned earlier. The positioning should reflect what Penelope was talking about, and it should bridge the gap between the consumer perception and the reality of Tate Britain's offer. And we're trying to develop, and you'll hate this word, I know, but a consumer understanding of what there is to experience at Tate Britain. Because that is when people are coming here, that is what they're doing. They're making a choice between coming here or the RA or the South Bank, and we need to put a thought in their minds clearly that they're going to understand and make a decision to come here. And then amplify it through every single media channel that we have. So we have taken the view that Tate Britain is an understanding of Britain expressed through art from 1500 to the present day. And it is suitably vague, because I don't really want to get personally into the debate about what an understanding of Britain or British is. I'm very keen that the audience does that on our behalf. And our view is it's best executed to the juxtaposition of contemporary and historic works covering a broad and diverse range of subjects. All these subjects can be dealt with because there will certainly be a work of art that represents the subjects I've written up there in the collection. So we've called it the This Is Britain campaign. It's actually This Is Britain, the home of British art, which is how we want people who come to this gallery to believe they're coming to this. And again, the vast majority of people who come to this gallery are not people who work in the art world. So the prism through which I want them to come in is this. And we've taken artworks and juxtaposed them, some completely randomly. This happens to be because sheep are on a painting, and an old painting, and it's Damien Hirst's artwork. Now we said here, This Is Britain. See the BP collection displays for free. Tate Britain. These are posters that have appeared on the Tube recently. Now what I do want to come to is this issue, the biggest debate, I'll come to in a second actually. Here's another rather wonderful poster. And another. I'm just going to whip through a few of them. Now, a little bit more serious, a little less serious, a little bit more serious. Now, here was where we got into a really, really sticky area. You'll notice that down here, there is a very thin slither of a flag. At one point, it was a lot bigger. It surrounded the entire thing. This caused the biggest debate internally. And for an essentially a liberal institution, which is thankfully what the Tate is, waving the Union Jack around smacks a little bit, could be misinterpreted as actually far-right ideology, which is rather scary and is clearly not what we're trying to do. And any time you use the flag, it's an absolutely polarizing visual. Because you want to avoid the absurdity of Boris Johnson waving. I mean, when you represent Britain, if you remember Boris in the Shanghai, in the Beijing Bird's Nest Stadium, it was sort of a flag, a bus, a bowler hat, and other sort of ridiculous assertions of shorthands to visual shorthands to British culture, of which the flag, I suppose, is universally acceptable, but it's fraught with complications. This is the thing. Choosing the artworks was quite easy, actually, but the use of the flag was an unbelievably polarizing issue here and debated long and hard. Now, if you come to Tate Britain, actually, above Tate Britain, there's a flag waving every single day, actually. Now, what we agreed is we would use the flag, but really only in advertising, because the This Is Britain thought is something which we're developing way beyond advertising. But these are posters, and we're going to use the flag in posters largely to a foreign audience, because actually the percentage of audience who come here from abroad is very high, and we want to give them clear clues of what it's about. And then it became about how much flag, how flag waving should we be? And we ended up being actually remarkably discreet, with just the thinnest of slithers. But on some of them we make it a little bigger, some a little less, depending on how nationalistic we're feeling. What it's now moving to, and I'm showing you stuff here. We actually had a pitch from an agency who said, we'd like you to develop the thought of This Is Britain further than just simple posters. And this is fresh. Half the people in Tate haven't even seen this, actually, but I'm happy to share it with you. What we want to do is to develop this through online, through social media, through Facebook, through Twitter, and various forums, to open up the discussion of This Is Britain and the relationship between what that means in an art context. for which I think our role is to open the debate, not necessarily to conclude it. And we're very keen that a conversation starts to happen early next year about what it means to, what This Is Britain means in relation to Tate Britain. These are a few of the other posters we're developing. So if you take down there, these are not agreed, they're just some roughs. But down here, what is your Britain? And we're just suggesting some subject areas. Again, what is your Britain? This is love. It will all be artworks drawn from the collection, even though some of these may not be at the moment. This is macho. This is Britain. I suppose we're taking different definitions of Britain, but similar to the ones that you 6 subject areas. This is recession. This is Britain. This is sport, which we'll use something like this next summer, I imagine. This is party. But more interesting than this will be actually in the online space, how people develop this, how they work it through, and how we develop a narrative of trying to answer the question of the relationship between Britain and this gallery. We had a rather silly idea whereby if you were a tourist coming to the UK, maybe the first place you should come to is Tate Britain, to actually get a sense of what this place is about, and certainly over the last 500 years, as represented through artistic endeavours. So we've gone into this subject not from a particularly academic perspective, but from a very, one might argue, slightly simplistic perspective, fully aware of the issues and fully aware of the dangers and potholes that you could fall into in this debate. But I think it's exactly the right place for Tate to be. After all, it is called Tate Britain. But I'm not sure I can answer the question that was offered. But what we're trying to do is to present Tate Britain in a very British context that allows us to express to an audience what they're likely to experience here. Thank you.